great. Well, I'll have y'all kind of talk about your roles first, but after we get off this call, y'all can leave the call, and then I'll do like a little intro. So I'll make sure I get your roles actually right.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Well, maybe first, I know we just went through these, through what your roles are, but maybe y'all can just tell us about what you do at Priceline and what your roles are.
Sure. I'll start, and then those two guys can fight it out. Who wants to go first? So, like I said, my name is Tony Padovano. I am the chief of staff for the technology team at Priceline. I'm also a program manager by trade, technical program manager. So, as chief of staff, one of my main functions is to make sure that we hire qualified staff to come in and fill whatever vacancies we might have. So I work with the team, with both of these guys are on the hiring team, where we try to identify the people who are going to help us be able to build the products that we provide and to expand the footprint of our company.
All right. I'll go next. Pedro Gutierrez. My title says director, but I see myself as like a dev manager of two teams. And I see it's like kind of two-folded. There's like the micro level, right? The team's focus, and my role there is really to kind of remove obstacles, kind of grow the team members on my team, and also the health of our applications that are under my ownership, and really kind of pitch in when it comes to like designing solutions, either as architecting, and then there's an aspect of like project management. And then like the macro level is kind of having peers like Adi kind of hashing out the direction, like what technology stacks, what direction we should go in. So those are like kind of the layers of.
Yeah, I think Adi Deshpande, senior director of SiteX Packages Post-Working Universe Checkout. So okay. You're not going to get off that. It's okay. But I think Pedro hit most of the nails on the head. It's like our responsibility is really towards like ensuring good product, right? By by basically staffing up our teams, right? Making them capable of removing roadblocks, right? And giving them guidance, education on a variety of areas. I think the other piece of the puzzle that we do a lot is work with our product teams, right? And our other stakeholders to kind of lay out the technical roadmap and build out the strategy, right? Figure out what they need and kind of pre-plan in advance to kind of, figure out how the technology rolls with that and supports the growth of the product and the business.
I'm kind of curious how you each got to where you are now in the technical world. Like, do you all have kind of traditional CS degree paths into tech, or like, did you take a less traditional route? Tony, I'm seeing that's a no.
Yeah, for me, it was a completely accidental move into this field. In a lifetime ago, I was a newspaper reporter. I have a liberal arts degree. I have my master's in liberal arts degree from Columbia University. And I had no intention of doing anything related to computer science or travel. So I just kind of 20 odd years ago, more than 20 years ago, I heard some advertisements for Priceline.com on the radio. I said, oh, that's an interesting idea. And I knew somebody who was working here at the time, at Priceline at the time. I gave them a call, came up for an interview, and I started my movement into Priceline. And so I kind of went from completely non-technical, and these two jokers will probably tell you that I am still not technical, and I actually agree with them.
Yeah.
But I started my tenure there at Priceline as a project manager, mm-hmm. and kind of just have over the past 20 years taken on 5 or 6 different roles, essentially 5 different jobs, or 5 or 6 different jobs in the company that just kind of led to more projects, leading bigger and bigger projects. As the company's grown, I've been able to kind of grow along with the company, so it's been nice.
Cool. A lot of learning on the job.
Yeah. Which, by the way, is one of the reasons why I really like students from boot camps, because a lot of them have changed careers and they've done it by choice. They haven't been forced to.
Skipping questions, Tony.
Sorry?
I'm sure you're skipping questions.
I'm sorry.
We'll get to it more.
But you know, it's relevant because these people have made a choice that, hey, I have a different career. I'm going to change it. The people we've hired from Flatiron, I think most of them had a different career, completely different field of study. So
it's why I asked the question also, because I think sometimes people assume that everybody who's working at a tech company like got a CS degree, went through a very traditional path, and that's usually not the case. So, or sometimes not the case. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then Adi and Pedro, did y'all both get CS degrees?
Yeah, I have a computer science degree from Arizona State University. I worked at a small software company, and then I worked at a consulting firm, which with both of those jobs, you're doing a number of different things and different technologies. And then, 7 years here at Priceline, where I jumped around. Mostly is like 90%, 80% on the front end, and then some native app years here as well. So.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I have a CS degree from NJIT, but I think how I ended up here is still sort of a more non-linear story, because for most of my career, I was a back-end engineer. I would do big, large-scale implementations of like Java, stuff like that, and I got put into a job a number of years back that where it was still building up like websites at scale or whatever, but it was more or less like a team that was new and didn't have a lot of experience, and so we sort of had to roll up our hands and then become confident with it, and it kind of stuck, so so I stayed around. How I got here at Priceline, I think I would say nepotism, right? I got the job because I knew somebody on the inside, I think.
Nice. A warm introduction. So can y'all give us some kind of context about the engineering team at Priceline? Like, how large is the entire engineering department, and why does Priceline need to hire a lot of engineers?
I'll start at the top and let these guys talk about some more detail, I think. Priceline, we get more than 400 employees in technical department. More than half of them are people who are writing code for the back end or the front end. And our company is growing. We're part of Booking Holdings. Our company is still growing at a pretty rapid clip. Priceline provides a number of critical services for the entire group. And as the company continues to grow, and as we continue to move into international markets with Priceline.com, we just have a lot of work to do. On top of that, we are a 20-year-old company. So while we operate in a lot of ways like a startup, we're actually a fairly mature company, and that brings with it a lot of legacy code that creates headaches for these two folks who are trying to build new products and to support old products. So there's always a need for talented hands to come in.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I mean, what roles that we're having in our at Priceline Engineering, especially with the candidates that we're getting from boot camps, are mostly front end, which is it's a really good entry point. I'll say I wouldn't say mastery, but just they're proficient on knowing one specific language, JavaScript, and that's like kind of foundation. Everything else could build on top of that. I think most teams are using React here, some Redux, some Apollo, some GraphQL. So building on those skill sets I feel that the candidates come prepared in that sense. And I think another critical thing that we're looking for in engineering is like high collaboration, and just being eager to learn and just participate as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally, like that's the thing, right? Is like that what we what we focus on is on the customer experience side of it, right? Like like there has to be a level of relationship with the user base that's using our product, and what we found is that aside from the technology alignment, right? A lot of these people, a lot of the people, the candidates that we've met, if not even hired, right, gravitate towards a relationship with a customer, right? A design relationship, a UX relationship, right? Like they fundamentally start off with it seems like the way they start off is by creating web pages and kind of seeing the interactivity and kind of and being wowed by it and feeling the power and the mastery of it, and like that relates very well to what we're doing, because it is it's a very human touch oriented type of application that we're building.
For sure. Have you all hired or interviewed Flatiron School students?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then how many have y'all hired? Do you know?
Tony's got numbers.
We hired 7, I think.
7? That's cool.
7 in our we had
probably a little bit more than that.
Oh, probably like 10 by now.
I have 5 on across my 2 teams. So
Alex, and then we have Andy. And
that's right. We did a second batch. We're probably at around 10.
Cool.
And that was over the course of 2. I don't think it's more than 10, but it's over the course of 2 interview sessions.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 cohorts.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. It's more different.
And they're spread out.
Kenny marketing.
Yeah. I'll say our front end engineering is around roughly, I'll say 70 to 80.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? And they're probably 12. So they're a big chunk. They represent it.
Is it 12 really?
Yeah. Could be 5. Yes, 3, and then there's a few on the SETI team as well. So
yeah.
Okay.
So
that's right. That's right. Okay, you're right. Sorry.
No, that's great. That's awesome. Okay, so like 10 to 12.
Yeah.
And Pedro, you mentioned before the types of roles that you typically see Flatiron students going into on the front end side. Any other, I guess my question is, do you ever hire a bootcamp grad as a senior developer, or is there like a career path at Priceline that you think is kind of perfect for a bootcamp grad?
Yeah, I mean, if all of them came on board as associates, but we do, Adi's actually heads this, there's a curriculum for associates coming on board and how they can make progress in their career at Priceline. And we have a number of things, even for any new hires, we have like a 30, 60, 90 plan. We're really focused on when we onboard that they have a successful track here at Priceline. So we create a number of programs for new hires, and we kind of cater for a little bit more for Flatiron, because there are some gaps. I think most the Flatiron candidates have high aptitude when it comes to programming, but they just really don't have the experience. It's really when it comes to. So we try to escalate or put some programs to catapult them in a sense. So yeah, we have those in place specifically for them.
That's amazing. I mean, I think any bootcamp grad would be really excited to hear that. I think people get used to, learning at a really high clip for 12 to 14 weeks, and then they get to their first job and they're like, all right, I need to keep learning. So it's really cool that y'all understand that and have systems in place to kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's also about the culture too. Like, one of the things is, regardless if you're a boot camp or not, it's someone has to be approachable here, right? So, and cultural fit is really big because of that. And kind of the things that we preach is like, if you're stuck on anything, you're never alone. So you have someone on your team, on your scrub team. If you escalate something, one of the things I say is, if I can't find an answer or I can't give you the answer for something, I'm going to find someone within this organization that can. So, and then whenever I need to go across departments, everyone's always welcome to just to help out as much as possible. So.
Do y'all meet these applicants like when they come in for an interview, when they apply for the job, or are you attending their final project demo day at Flatiron School? Or are you meeting them like in the classroom before they graduate?
So we did a round where we actually, like, you know, a number of us, right, including Marty at one point, who is our CTO, they did the initial like speed screening with the candidates, but like Pedro and I, who are obviously involved in the on the hiring team, have done phone screens, have done first round interviews, have done second round interviews, have done finals in some cases. Like we've doubled up a lot, right? So we've met them at all different stages of the interview life cycle. You know, like we don't, and part of that is really like our culture is flexible in that, like, you know, like everyone needs to have a piece of the understanding of the people that we're bringing in, because we're keen on their success, and we want to make sure that, like, you know, that our culture can support what they're bringing to their table.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the folks that you've actually hired from Flatiron School, because I'm assuming that they went through a technical interview to get the job that they have. So how did they do, and what kind of got them the job, if there was something that stood out across all of those candidates?
Let me chime in here real quick. Just to kind of, our engagement with Flatiron has been, we get a call from Felix. I don't know, you know Felix? Felix Z? Anyways.
I don't, but their team is so big now.
Felix is our contact at Flatiron. And Felix will set up 25-minute speed rounds for 20 to 30 candidates. We'll do that over a couple of hours. From that interview, and so our CTO Marty, myself, and another one of our other directors had done the first round of them, where we just identified people we thought were high potential, and then we set up. Then those candidates went into the normal interview process. So that interview process has 2 rounds to start with. One's a technical round. One is a round for what we call capacity for mastery. That basically is somebody's ability to learn quick. And in both of those things, we're looking for a cultural fit. In those rounds, people like Adi and Pedro were intimately involved with the Flatiron students. The second time around, it was very much the same process. Adi and Pedro are actually doing the speed rounds. Once the regular interviews happened, we generally do a final interview, and because of Pedro and Adi's positions as dev managers, managing directly engineers, they actually are in the final interview, and they have the final say on whether people get hired. For the context of the interviews, I'll hand off to these guys because they do them all the time.
I'm going to say WebSockets. Actually, the first interview I actually did with Pedro was for one of the bootcamp grads. And really, I mean, they did, you know, a number of them, they do pretty well on the technical side of things, especially the parts they know, right? Like one of the key things that we focus on is not just a standard tech interview, like can you code your way out of this particular problem, right? But is we sort of throw it back to them and we say, talk about something that you're passionate about, a technology or project or plan, and really that gives them a chance to shine on an area that they can capably talk about, right? Like, you know, instead of putting a random set of expectations on them. And the things that stood out to me were like, you know, some of the candidates that we ended up hiring, they're really passionate about the technologies and the things that they wanted to accomplish with the technologies, right? And so they had an impetus to dive deep, not because of, you know, they were studying for a test, but because they were trying to solve a problem. And like that speaks really well to the nature of, like, you know, their ability to jump into a problem space, their ability to, you know, understand what they're trying to do, and their ability to deliver a result, right? Which I think are high qualifiers for success at our company.
And it's also like the projection, right? You could really see that they could be an individual contributor, and that's the ultimate goal, right? So, so we kind of try to measure the intangibles, which that sounds impossible to do, but they really jump out at you. So if someone is kind of passionate and And I think the learning mindset is really kind of critical, and that shows up clearly. So that I think that's the way to becoming a successful engineer is always continuously learning and trying to discover things and ask the critical question like, how does this work?
Yeah.
Right. So if they could kind of convey that in one form or another to us, it really pops.
Yeah, on the technical side, like, when we ask the standard technical about, like, can you program this or that, right? The things we actually look for is, like, obviously competency, right? Like, if you say, JavaScript, like, we're going to make sure you know JavaScript. But the other thing that we look for, especially with the ASCs, right, is coachability, right? If we're quizzing you and, like, you're stuck or whatever, right, we give you a hint, like, how you respond to that hint, right? Like, some people would get frustrated. I mean, yeah, and this is all candidates, but, like, but coachability is a big deal because ultimately, like, your desire to learn mapped with your capacity to learn, it really needs to go together. And so I think our process sort of serves as well to figure out both those pieces. And I think the Flatiron candidates, I mean, clearly we 10% of our workforce here, right? Mm-hmm. So they responded well to that. So
and the last part is communication, right?
Yeah.
Most boot campers do, I think, excel a little bit better than like the traditional. It's just kind of expressing what they're doing, and especially when they're stuck. This is why I'm stuck. I really don't know why. And even though on the flip side, there might be not as skillful as some other candidates, but you could just see how you could possibly fill in those gaps for them. So.
Well, that's really good advice. Thanks for walking us through that. And also, I think it says a lot about Priceline and your kind of organization that you're asking folks, not to like solve a random problem that they're not going to be able to solve, but rather like talk about what they do know and things like that. That's a very progressive way of hiring technical talent. So that's really cool.
Also, can I just go one more thing at you? You asked if anybody gets hired as a senior engineer. The answer to that question is out and out no. I suppose it's not out of the realm of possibility. Somebody could walk in and just blow us away with their command of a technical skill. But we're really looking for people coming out of the program as entry-level engineers. Some of them may have, actually some of them I know had computer science degrees, and that's great. But there was a time here not too long ago when we would not even hire anybody out of college with a computer science degree. This has been a relatively new avenue for us to pursue. It's worked out fantastic. I'm glad we're doing it for a number of reasons. But the career path at Priceline starts at associate, goes to mid-level, senior, principal, fellow.
I think, I don't think we'll never say never. Like, it's entirely possible that there is a, like the hope diamond in the rough, right? But the reality is very simple. That that most of the candidates, in fact, pretty much all of them, I think, they don't have the work experience, right? They might have like a technical background or whatever, right? But part of that thing is that that we expect, like, that label is not necessarily diminutive in so much as we're saying, like, that this is your first work experience, and we're going to treat you in a slightly more refined way in order to make sure that you succeed, right? It's not like saying like, oh, you're not capable of doing something else. It's the fact that that we acknowledge that there are some gaps in your ability, and we want to make sure that we push you to the further as quickly as possible.
That's totally fair. Well, at Flatiron, students are learning Rails, JavaScript, a little bit of Rails, JavaScript. Are your new hires or your bootcamp hires working in those languages, or have they had to learn like completely new languages and technologies? What is their kind of
we're
technical gap, I guess?
So we're not Rails. So the things that they do learn are obviously Rails, JavaScript, React, right? We are JavaScript and React. We're not so much Rails, and so that obviously that's one of the things that makes it some parts easier, right? Because we can get them rolling on a reasonably sized stack much more effectively, right? What is funny though is that in 9 months or whatever, they picked up a new programming language. Like, that's a good telling sign, right? Is that they've learned I always ask them, like, in one of the speed rounds, like what did you learn? What did you take away from Flatiron, right? And their answer was always I've learned how to learn, right? And I think that that's an important, like, like they figured out, like, it's not just about the reading, it's not just about the writing, it's about, like trying different things, like pushing the envelope in certain areas to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I think that that's fundamental. So, their technology alignment is good for us, clearly, because we can leverage that. But I think their technical background and stepping into that is even better.
Yeah, and just to extend that just briefly is that it's not really what you learn on the job that makes you excel as an engineer. It's something outside, right? If it's really like an interest, a hobby, picking something else, whatever you learn, it's always going to come back to your 9 to 5. So
yeah, I mean, we know people, like, even on the teams right now, they're like, they know Rails and JavaScript, but like some of them are like learning like Rust and Go, and it's just like it's great. I mean, and, they can bring all that back to bear. Like what Pedro said, this is a problem at hand. How to, like those programming language formulate your thinking. They change how you perceive a problem, and that's more than useful for us, because that means that they're able to consider the same problem in a multitude of ways.
Well, so without giving away any like Priceline company secrets, and Pedro, you kind of started answering this question earlier, but what kind of responsibilities do the Flatiron hires, have at Priceline? What are they? Can you share a little bit about what they're working on?
I can share a little bit about that. One of the biggest thing is, first, we're a lean organization, even compared to the other brands within, and even our competitors. So with that, and one other thing that we run kind of fast is running our A/B tests. This is really the money driver, right?
Lifeblood, yeah.
Our lifeline. So they're basically from, I'll say 2 weeks in, they're basically are given features to write. And then there's also the health portion, like I mentioned earlier, responsibility to clean up a lot of our code bases as well. So those are kind of the big 2 things. And I have one Flatiron candidate now who's been here for roughly 6 months, work on a big feature, a new product, and he's contributing in multiple ways, from designing solutions to doing some of the front end implementation, some of the back end, our StateQL, and then also helping the product team. So just giving ideas and giving feedback and kind of refining it. So there's a lot of ownership that's given within the first few weeks on being onboarded to Priceline.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for us, there's no company secrets, because literally, like, what they're building, everyone's seeing, right? Like, they work on the one place where, like, they're, like if it doesn't show up, then we have a problem. So, and yeah, like they're working on, they're working, like, especially on the SideX and packages side, they're working on really sort of significant experiential changes, right? Like we're fundamentally reframing how the customer experience needs to go, and they're a big part of that. But on the back, like, they're also, like what Peter said, right? They're in support. Like, the great thing about them is they're enthusiastic and they're energetic, and they, like, for example, they have a background with testing, with writing tests or whatever, right? So, like, off the bat, like, we can sort of coach them in that, but they're able to engage and kind of like bring their ideation and conceptualization right into it, and be like, oh, you know what, we just learned about this thing and that thing, and like that's immediately helpful to like improving their product from the inside as well. So there's nothing off limits to them. It's that we make sure that that they're thinking about the problem the right way, and then it's off to the races.
Do y'all have like a feedback loop set up with Flatiron at all? I'm curious if you're able to like influence their curriculum, if you notice that there's a technical gap somewhere, or because it seems like the technologies that the students are learning actually lines up pretty well with what y'all are using at Priceline.
We have a little bit of a feedback loop there through Felix. I think after our first set of interviews, we talked to him about some things that we wanted to maybe a little bit more focus on. I know that the React, these kids, I don't want to call them kids because they're not all kids. The students come out of there with a very good fundamental understanding of what React is. There's a lot of advanced things you can do with that people like Adi and Pedro and some of our other senior folks have have picked up some along the way that these guys and women don't know, but they have a good foundation. I think we asked them, for instance, you guys use Rails, we don't. There's a couple of things that we don't do as well, and I think we asked them about, we've just really kind of dipped our toe into Redux and Go, and we have passed that along. I don't know if there's been many changes due to that, but they're aware of what our technical stack looks like and what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Cool.
The thing is, a lot of our stuff is kind of proprietary.
Yeah.
But so in the sense that but every organization has that. So coming on board, there's a lot of things that they'll have to learn how we do specifically. Like even our A/B testing is homebrew, right? We built our own. There's a number of things how we deploy. It's very specific to Priceline. So I wouldn't want to alter the curriculum because it really wouldn't.
Right. It's funny. I mean, it's like, yeah, like everyone there deploys on Heroku, and we actually we clearly don't use Heroku, but so it's I think there's obviously things that that if they understood how A/B testing impacted customer experience, that's a benefit that I think that would be easier for us to ingest as a new candidate, right? But by and large, I think the curriculum is pretty good, and it's pretty solid, right? Ultimately, again, it's about what the fundamentals that it provides to the candidate, which then can be reflected in the work that they do and the knowledge that they espouse themselves, right? It's like, I don't think in contrast, right, we've met candidates from very good schools, quote unquote, like Ivies and stuff like that, which we would even be less impressed by, just because it's not not necessarily about the knowledge in the curriculum, right? It's about putting it all together, right? And there's no knobs or switches that we'll twitch in order to make that any more saleable.
Yeah.
They're really exposed to two, right?
Yeah.
Rails gives them that back end exposure. Maybe it doesn't line up with us, and then they get the front end. But after that, it's really on them on how much they want to dive in. They want to really dive in JavaScript. There's a lot to look into, right? From parsing to the engine to everything, and equivalent on the back end. So,
I think we can say that the people we've hired out of Flatiron have been prepared to come in as associates, to come in as new engineers. They have a good basic skill set. Their attitude's tremendous. They bring new ideas to us. We can learn a lot from them because they have a different perspective on things, and they all seem to learn very well. And we have set up things at Priceline, as Pedro said, to kind of extract the best that we can out of them to kind of help them along their career path. But Adi actually is running, Pedro kind of breezed over it a little bit, but Adi is running a ongoing curriculum for these candidates to talk about not how to write code, but how we use code, right? I mean, this is one of the things we talked about when we were setting this up. We don't want to really have a class to teach somebody the fundamentals of writing something in Go or writing a new class. We want to really tell them these are the standards at Priceline that we use. These are some of the things that we think you should be considering when you're looking at code and looking at problems that we're asking you to solve. So it seems to me like I think the people coming out of the school are pretty well set up for that success.
For sure. Okay, so I'm curious because you have hired 10 to 12 Flatiron grads, but I'm assuming that y'all have interviewed a ton more than that. It sounds like maybe 50 to 60 in the speed interviews. So what kind of stood out about the folks that you did end up hiring? And I guess maybe in a better question, what's your advice to a fresh boot camp graduate who wants to make themselves stand out in the hiring process? What should they focus on with their kind of limited time before they start applying for jobs?
I think what I would say is two things, right? One is know your stuff. Like one of the biggest things that I always say, anybody, right, is like, if you're going to put something on your resume, right, like someone's going to ask you about it, like you got to be prepared for that, right? So, like know your stuff, and it's okay like to not put stuff on that you don't know, right? Like everyone understands the context, right? And I always feel like that's an important piece. Like the people that we've hired, we always felt like they knew their stuff. We felt like like there's a bunch of stuff that they didn't know, but the stuff that they knew, that we felt that they knew them well. The other thing is, I tell the candidates, is to blend in your background, right? Like there's a trick to, everyone, gravitates towards the boot camp for a specific reason, right? Whether it's economics or whether it's like personal desire, whatever, right? But like, their background also matters a little bit, right? It's like if you come from a client services background, like focus on your customer facing, like leverage that, right? Bring that to forward. If you come from if you're dealing with spreadsheets all the time, right, then your analytics will come into play, right? You can leverage that to make yourself a better candidate, right? Because you're bringing more to the table than with just what your bootcamp resume says, right? Like that's what's important. And I think that the people that we've seen, right, that have been able to speak to what their background was. We have a guy. I mean, there's several guys like background is in music theory, for example, right? And like they're able to like use that and say like like one of the things that I like is like putting things in harmony, right? Like that's a big deal. But like when you can actually like construct that story and present it, then I think it makes you a much better candidate.
Yeah, for me, kind of the thing is really because they kind of start this, but they really don't push it to the finish line. Like create a project, get it in front of someone, right? Try to create a situation where you have problems that you need to solve, right? And what does that yield? That yields experience, right? And then they could actually bring that into interviews and say, I have tackled X amount, and this is how I actually solved it. So yeah, solving problems is kind of the biggest thing. And I think most of the candidates at some point have mentioned that one way or another, especially when they're referencing their projects. And it's a great telling sign that there's more there. So.
Okay, y'all, it's 3:50, so I just want to make sure I'm respecting your time, but do you have time for a couple more questions?
I do.
Okay, I'll make sure we're done by.
I do. I have a hard stop at 4, actually.
Okay, I'll make sure we stop at 4.
Okay.
Or before that.
Tony,
did you want to add something?
You guys can continue though. I mean, it's enough with 3 people speaking. It might go faster with 2.
I just want to add my perspective is a little bit different than these 2 guys since they are writing code on a day-to-day basis. From where I was coming into the interview, I kind of assumed that they all had a very similar fundamental ownership of the skills we would need to excel here. So instead, and this kind of buffs off of what Adi was talking about, I want to know why they decided to go to Flatiron School, and what caused them to pick the project that they picked. A lot of it was weird, but it was pretty clear. I think I talked to 13 or 14 people that first day, and the people who did projects because they actually had a real problem, a real thing that they wanted to solve, ended up being, I think, all of the people that I forwarded on to the final interview. The people who came and said, yeah, I did this thing so I could, test this out. I just didn't feel the enthusiasm. And I didn't feel like the urge to be curious about something that they knew nothing about. That may just have been my personal thing. I want somebody to come in and be passionate about, hey, I love this. This is great. I like getting up to the work, 5 a.m. and going to work and coming home at 7 p.m.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great advice. I've been doing a lot of like final project spotlights where I have a student actually like walk us through their final project after a boot camp. And the most interesting ones are always like, I worked in the film industry before and I was working in like a bunch of Excel spreadsheets to predict what a film's budget should be or how well a film was going to do. So my final project was like, I built that in PHP. That's so much more interesting than, I built a Twitter clone, I guess. So y'all have all been at Priceline and in tech for some time now. So I really appreciate your kind of holistic perspective on the industry. But do you have any thoughts on how you've seen coding boot camps in general just like impact the tech industry in some way, positively, negatively? I'm just kind of interested in y'all's perspective, having been here for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two ways to perceive this, right? Is the positive impact, right, is the democratization of learning and information, right? Which is always like like I can't speak to I definitely can't speak to Tony, but I can't even speak to Pedro. It's like I got into programming when I was like 6 years old with a Commodore 64, like copying stuff from Byte magazine into into a terminal, right? Like that's what I started doing it, from a very young age, right? And so. But that's kind of what it took early on, right, to get into programming, right? It was like there was a high barrier to entry, right? Like languages were more difficult, systems took a lot more to understand, and now with the way things are, it's amazing to see how different kinds of people get into that, right? So it has this great impact of like infusing the industry with a lot of energy and a lot of new talent, right? But and with ideas, right? People who are capable of sort of building. Coming from a product vision mindset to be able to construct something is a really amazing thing, right? But then there's also this complaint, right? There's a dilution of competency, right? Like the fact of like that these people have spent years and years, learning about computer science, right, and understanding the fundamentals of graph theory and whatever, right? And these companies are hiring these bootcamp grads that that can do the work, right? And so I think it's less about the boot camps. It's more about the industry, right? How we feel challenged by it, because some of the work is easily accessible and should be accessible, right? It's like do we gate the door in order to make ourselves feel better, or do we change how we can build problems and solve problems, right? Because we have all these people that are capable of doing something else. And I think that us, or at least for myself, right, I lean towards that side, right? The opportunity to solve greater problems, because the lesser problems are much more effectively solved, is a big win for us, right? And we should embrace that.
And for me, I just feel I look back, and the people that we hired, not necessarily Flatiron, but there's some other boot campers who had experience that we hired here, and some of them moved on. And I think some of them were extremely talented and brilliant. And the thought comes through my mind that there is a possibility that this person would never be in tech if it wasn't for a boot camper. And also the second thing that comes, it's here, hiring is always a challenge. New York's very competitive, and it's actually helped us a lot, kind of filling kind of the gaps and kind of doing a lot of the work that it frees up. And also you should have a blend, right? You shouldn't just have a team of just seniors, right? It gives an opportunity for people to mentor, to coach, and it makes them a better engineer as well. So it is definitely positive, I think, on multiple fronts. But those are kind of the two takes I have on the industry.
I think in the last few years we've seen, or just in the last couple of years, we've seen these huge companies, Apple and Google, lifting their requirement for a 4-year computer science degree to apply. Did Priceline go through something like that? Like, was it ever a concern or a blocker that these students didn't have like CS degrees when they applied?
Tony mentioned that earlier, right? So.
You're muted, Tony.
Oh, Tony.
Sorry. And the crowd goes wild that I'm muted. We didn't have really a prohibition against it, but we had a predilection towards not doing it. And actually, a lot of it goes to what Adi had said with the last one. There was Priceline had a lot of old legacy systems, and we thought that we needed to have on a much more limited staff, much more senior people who had basically broader shoulders to carry a lot more of the load. When we modernized our tech stack starting a few years ago, we've been working towards this for more than just a few years, but when we modernized our tech stack, we realized that that requirement was really no longer a requirement. It's something that we could be much more open-minded to. The other thing is when our new CTO, he's not new anymore, he's been here for about a year. When he came in, he really kind of hypercharged us to go out and bring in new talent. And like I said, I think that the folks in the Flatiron really emphasize the kind of people we want to bring on board. So.
Okay, well, y'all, I want to let you get back to your day. This has actually been a very fascinating conversation for me, just to hear how y'all think about boot camps as folks who actually work with boot campers every day. So my last question, kind of easy, I guess, but will you hire from Flatiron in the future?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
cool.
Sure. Why not?
Why not? Sure.
But actually, you know what? It's beyond why not. I think it's a solid yeah.
Yeah, it is a solid yes.
Yeah,
I know you're
joking.
I know you're joking, but I think it's important to be crystal clear. We are very happy, and so these guys are working with these new employees directly. I'm a step or two removed from that, but I look at it from the entire organization and in the balance of the organization. For me, these people have been spectacular hires because, like I said, they bring a lot of new life, a lot of new ideas, and the enthusiasm they bring is infectious. So that old crumbs like these two guys get all excited again about doing their work. So.
Well, I think that is the perfect place to end. So, Tony, Adi, Pedro, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. I'll let y'all get to your next meetings. Sorry we went over a little bit, but like I said before, just look out for an email from me in the next couple of weeks, and I'll transcribe this and edit it, and I'll edit the video. We can decide what to do with the video later.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank y'all so much.
Bye.
Have a great
Have a
weekend.
good one.
Bye.
Oh yes, have a good weekend. Okay, so I'm gonna do the intro or the outro. So I said, and thank you so much for joining and watching. Let us know what you'd like to see on the next course report video. Bye. And thank you so much for joining. Let us know in the comments if there are other employers that you would like to see on the next course report Q&A video, and we will see you on the next one. Bye. Okay, so I'm gonna do the intro. Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining. I'm Liz Eggleston and I run Course Report, which is a resource for choosing the best coding bootcamp for you. So you can use Course Report to read thousands of alumni reviews, do a ton of research, and find a bootcamp that fits your budget, your time commitment, and your learning style, all in Course Report. So I am joined today by Tony, Pedro, and Adi, who all work on the engineering team at Priceline, which, as you know, is a platform that helps us all find great deals on travel, hotel rooms, flights, rental cars. Everybody knows Priceline. And in the past year or so, they've actually hired about 10 Flatiron School graduates onto their technical teams. So, of course, I've got questions. I want to know what stood out to them about the graduates that they hired, what those boot campers are actually working on at Priceline today, and what they think about coding boot camps in the larger tech landscape. And I cannot wait to ask them all of my questions. So thanks so much for joining, y'all. So before we get into these questions, I very vaguely kind of said that you are all on the engineering team, but maybe you can tell us more about each of your roles at Priceline. Okay, I'll just Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining. I'm Liz Eggleston and I run Course Report, which is a resource for choosing the best coding bootcamp for you. So you can use Course Report to read thousands of alumni reviews, you can do a ton of research, and find a bootcamp that fits your budget, your time commitment, your learning style, all of the above. And today I am joined, actually, hi everyone, thanks so much for joining. Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining. I'm Liz Eggleston and I run Course Report, which is a resource for choosing the best coding bootcamp for you. You can use Course Report to read thousands of alumni reviews, you can read all of our Q&As, and you can find a bootcamp that fits your budget, your time commitment, and your learning style. And today I am joined by Tony, Pedro, and Adi. Okay, I think we are live. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. I'm Liz Eggleston and I run Course Report, which is a resource for choosing the best coding bootcamp for you. You can use Course Report to read thousands of alumni reviews. I think we have over 20,000 alumni reviews now, and find a bootcamp that fits your budget, your time commitment, and your learning style. And today I am so excited to be joined by Tony Padovano, Pedro Gutierrez, and Adi Deshpande. All work Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining. I'm Liz Eggleston and I run Course Report, which is a resource for choosing the best coding bootcamp for you. You can use Course Report to read thousands of alumni reviews, I think over 20,000 now, and find a bootcamp that fits your budget, your time commitment, and your learning style. And today I'm super excited to be joined by Tony Padovano, Pedro Gutierrez, and Adi Deshpande, who all work with the engineering team at Priceline, which, as you know, is a platform that helps us all find great deals on travel, hotel rooms, flights, rental cars. You know what Priceline is. I don't need to tell everyone. And in the past year or so, they've actually hired about 10 Flatiron School graduates onto their technical team. So of course, we have questions. I want to know what stood out about the graduates that they hired, what those boot campers are working on at Priceline today, and what they think about coding boot camps in general in the larger tech industry. And I cannot wait to ask them all of my questions. So thanks so much for joining. And before we hop into these questions, I very vaguely kind of mentioned that you're all on the engineering team at Priceline, but tell us more about each of your roles at Priceline. What do you do every day?